Israel attacked Iran overnight in retaliation for a ballistic missile assault earlier this month, with the Middle East on the precipice of a regional war. 3 journalists were reportedly killed after an Israeli airstrike hit buildings where members of the press covering the war were staying. Georgia is voting in parliamentary elections that could determine whether the country's EU ambitions get back on track or if it falls into Russia's orbit. A Russian strike on a residential building in Kyiv killed at least 1 person and injured 5 others, according to Ukrainian officials. Israel launched airstrikes on what it described as military targets in Iran in retaliation for a ballistic missile assault earlier this month. There was no immediate information available on damage to the country, but Iranian state media reported the sound of explosions around Iran's capital Tehran without immediately elaborating. Iranian state television later identified some of the blasts as coming from air defense systems, without offering more details. 2 Israeli officials said the strikes on Iran were not targeting nuclear or oil facilities. The attack, threatened for weeks by Israel, comes as the Middle East sits on the precipice of a regional war, more than a year after an initial attack by Hamas killed around 1,200 Israelis. Since then, Israel has launched a devastating ground offensive in the Gaza Strip and an invasion of the neighboring Lebanon, targeting militants long-armed and aided by Tehran. An Israeli airstrike hit guest houses where journalists were staying in southeast Lebanon, reportedly killing 3 media staffers from 2 different news agencies. The airstrike turned buildings used by media outlets covering the war into rubble, with cars marked press being overturned and covered in dust and debris. The Israeli army did not issue a warning prior to the strike, which it said targeted Hezbollah militant infrastructure. The military later said the strike was being reviewed. Meanwhile, 2 people in Israel died of their wounds after a rocket attack from Hezbollah militants, the country's rescue services said. A further 7 people were injured after rocket shrapnel hit the Israeli town. Militants in Lebanon fired 45 projectiles into Israel on Friday. Some were intercepted by Israel's air defenses, whilst others reportedly fell into open areas. Georgia is voting in a divisive election which could determine its future in Europe, as the ruling Georgian Dream government faces off with a coalition of pro-EU parties. The parliamentary elections this weekend are being treated as a make-or-break vote by many Georgian citizens when it comes to the nation's prospects of joining the European Union. Ultimately, this vote has the potential to decide whether Georgia gets back on track to EU membership or if it embraces authoritarianism and falls into Russia's orbit. Many fear the ruling Georgian Dream is dragging the country away from joining the EU. Polls suggest that most Georgians favour joining the EU, but Brussels suspended the country's membership process after the Georgian Dream Party passed a law cracking down on freedom of speech in June. At least 1 person was reportedly killed and 5 injured after a Russian drone hit a 25-story residential building in Kyiv. Emergency responders were dispatched to the site of the attack to fight a fire which broke out on the upper floor of the building due to the strike. The fire was extinguished, but a search and rescue operation continued, according to Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko. 1 of the 5 injured was sent to hospital, according to Klitschko, and a first aid tent was set up at the site. Ukraine's emergency services say the attack damaged several apartments in the building, with around 100 people being evacuated after the drone struck. Prior to the attack, local media report an air alert had been sounded in Kyiv and other Ukrainian regions due to a mass Russian drone attack, a near daily occurrence in Ukraine for over a month.